Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today we're going to be exploring minimal APIs. Last week Microsoft has released .NET 6, which is a major release because it's an LTS version, which means it's a long-term support version. And basically this version is going to be supported for the next 3 years. Within this release there was a lot of updates, major updates. One of these major updates is minimal APIs. So let's see what are we going to be covering today. Today we're going to be discussing what is minimal API, what are they, how do they work, as well as we're going to be discussing some of the benefits that they bring to the table, and then we're going to be going into the ingredients that we're going to be needing in order for us to get started with minimal API, and then we're going to be starting into the coding. As always, please like, share and subscribe if you like this video. It will really help the channel. Now let's get started. So what is minimal API? By definition, minimal APIs means it's the essential component that's needed in order for us to build an HTTP API. But what does that mean? Let us go a bit deeper rather than the definition. In essence, it means that it's a fresh and new approach in order for us to build an API. It removes all of the complexity that the MVC brings to the table. At first, it could seem like a prototyping tool that is being used in order for us to create a quick and proof of concept application. But it could actually be utilized into real-world applications. Basically, with minimal API, all we need is the CSProc file and the program.cs file, removing all of the other dependencies, all of the other files that ASP.NET MVC requires in order for us to get our APIs up and running. Minimal API utilizes the power of C# and .NET 6 in order for us to build this level of APIs. It actually used top-level statement that was introduced in C# 9. As well, it utilized a lot of the new C# 10 features in order for us to make a quick and easy API. Basically, we can actually create a new API with 3 lines of code inside the program.cs as well as a CSProc. It's that simple to get started with it. So now let's see some of the benefits that minimal API brings to the table. So the first benefit that minimal API brings to the table is easy to get started. Because it's such a simple framework, all we need is a program.cs file and the CSProc. Basically, with 3 lines of code, as we have mentioned earlier, we can actually have an API up and running. And that makes it easy for anyone who wants to get started with .NET or anyone moving from different technologies into .NET. It removes all of the complexities, but also it allows anyone to get started easily. Those complexities are not actually removed, it's actually hidden. And we can actually utilize them and we can actually build our complexities as we need on top of that. But it's a very good point or very good starting point for anyone who wants to get started with C#, .NET and APIs. As well, it removes all of the ceremonies that ASP.NET, a web API, provides MVC. So basically it makes it much more easier for anyone to grasp the topics of an API. As well, performance. Because it's such an easy and light framework, the performance is much more faster in order for us to get started with minimal API. It takes less time in order for us to boot it up and utilize it. So I think the definition is minimal API can handle up to like 750,000 calls per second, while web API can use up to 500,000 calls per second. That's a major improvement. But again, for web APIs and minimal APIs, there's complete different scenarios that we want to utilize them with. And there is one scenario that fits all. And finally, minimal APIs do not utilize controllers. So all of that structure of MVC does not exist within minimal API. Basically, within that single file, we can actually write all of our endpoints and actually build from there. So let's see what do we need in order for us to get started with minimal API. First, we're going to be needing a code editor, which is going to be Visual Studio Code, which you can actually download with a link on the screen or in the description down below. As well, we're going to be needing .NET SDK. And for this, we're going to be needing the latest .NET version, which is going to be .NET 6. Now, let's get started into coding. We're going to start by opening our terminal. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is we need to check the version of the .NET SDK that we have installed. It needs to be .NET 6 or higher. So in order for us to check, we're going to be utilizing .NET -- version. And as we can see here, we have .NET version 6.0.100, which is the latest release of the .NET framework by the time of this recording. If you see any number bigger than that, that should be fine. If you see any number less than .NET 6, that means that you need to install the latest version of the .NET SDK. Great. So now that we have installed .NET SDK, and make sure that it's installed in the right we have installed the right version for it. What we're going to be doing right now is we need to create our application. So in order for us to create our application, we're going to be utilizing the .NET new keyword. So it's going to be .NET new web API. So far we are familiar with it, but then the new thing is going to be dash minimal. And here the dash minimal is going to inform the .NET framework that this API basically is going to be a minimal API. If we did not put that, it's going to be creating a normal web API. So let's do with both. So first we're going to be create with the minimal keyword, and then we're going to create another one without the minimal keyword. So dash minimal, and then we're going to be giving it the name, and we're going to call it to do API, because we're going to be creating a simple to do API. And this should take a few seconds. And now once we have done that, let us navigate to it, to basically to do API, and we're going to open it in Visual Studio Code. Perfect. So from the get-go, as soon as we open one, we can see here that our application structure looks way different from normal ASP.NET Web API. So in order for us to do this compare, let's go back to our terminal. Let's go back one folder and let's create another one, .NET new web API. And I'm not gonna specify right now the dash minimal. I'm just gonna dash the output, dash O. I'm gonna put to do API version 1, for example. It's gonna stand for no, we'll tell you what, we'll put MVC or yeah, MVC. Oh, I misspelled new, apologies. And this should take a few seconds, and now that we have it, so let's navigate to it. And let's open this as well in Visual Studio Code. And as we can see directly, there's a big difference in the folder structure. So let's compare it here. So first of all, we can see that we have bin, we have a controller folder in the MVC. Within the minimal API, we don't have a controllers folder anymore. OBJ, which is the expected one, properties is expected, the app settings is expected, program.cs, and then here in the MVC, we have also the weather forecast, which is we don't have it in the minimal API. And because this is the MVC, we don't have the startup class anymore. But if we're having, for example, .NET version 5, and that will create a startup class for us. So if we take a look, let's open our web browser. And if we take a look at an old application that we have built within .NET 5, which is also a to-do application, and let us look at the file structure, but this one is built within .NET 5, we can see that on top of every that we have program.cs, and we have the startup class, which is going to be responsible for bootstrapping everything. So as we can see here, there's a trend in .NET 6 in order for us to simplify everything that we currently have. So we have already started by the minimal API. Sorry, with the MVC, we already removed the startup class. With minimal API, we took that a step further. We removed everything related to the controllers. We simplified the startup of the application. And right now, we're going to open the program.cs, and we're going to see how simple that is. As well, on top of all of that, we can see that a lot of the complexities that were, or basically the ceremonies that we used to have basically inside .NET 5 has already been removed, and basically have been made way more simple with .NET 6 and .NET 6 minimal APIs. So let us go back here to our source code. But before we go into that, if you don't follow me on GitHub, please feel free to follow me on GitHub. You can find all of the repositories for everything that we discuss right there. So please make sure you follow me on GitHub as well. I had to plug that in right now. Anyways, so let's now go back to our source code, and let us open the program.cs, and let us just do a quick reminder. Inside the program.cs right now, it's gonna contain everything in order for us to run this API, and we're gonna check this out. So let's open this program.cs, and we can see there's a lot of things here. And basically, if we open the other one here, we can see that the weather forecast has already been embedded somehow here, and everything has been compressed into a single file. So in order for us to understand it better, we're going to delete all of this, and we're going to be starting a new minimal web API step by step. And we can see within 3 lines, we're going to have a fully functional API. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a web application. So in essence right now, this is going to be a top-level statement. If you don't know what a top-level statement is, a feature has been introduced within C#9. I'm going to link a video here somewhere and you can actually go and watch it out. But we're going to actually right now build our web application, or basically a minimal API with that, and we're going to be utilizing the out-of-the-box top-level statements. So var app equal web application dot create builder. We're gonna pass the arguments because at the end of the day it's a console application, so there must be some arguments if you want to pass. And basically after that we're gonna put dot build. So what is this? Within this first line we initialized a web application. So we know it's in essence all of ASP.NET or all of the .NET application are console applications by default. So what we're doing right now is we are identifying this application as a web API application or a minimal API application. So that we're currently doing. So basically what we did here is we have told .NET 6, the SDK, told them that this application is going to be a web application and we're going to build it. So that's the first line. The second line of code is we're going to be actually build our first endpoint. So as simple as that, we just defined our web application and now we're actually specifying an endpoint. So it's going to be app.mapGet, the first one, which is, as we know, within an API we have the get, post, put, delete, patch, all of those. So here we're just specifying a simple get, and we're going to say that the default route for this, it's going to be, actually we're going to make it as a lambda function, and basically we're going to return hello from minimal API. As simple as that. And once we have done all of this, the last step, as any console, is basically running it. So it's going to be app.run in order for us to run this application. So let us open our terminal. So terminal, new terminal. The first thing we're going to be doing is going to be building the application. So it's going to be .NET build, and we can see it's building. It's going to take a few seconds, and build succeeded. And now we're going to put .NET run, and we can see it's running, and it's already running on port 5295. So this is the port that we're going to be using. So let's copy this one. And the first task we're going to be doing is we're going to put this URL into the web browser. So let's go back to our web browser and let us paste it here. And as we can see, the first endpoint that we have got is hello from minimal API. Perfect. So that's as simple. Within 3 lines, we were able to create an API with an endpoint. Amazing. So that's the first thing. The second point is let's keep it running, and let's open it in Insomnia. So let's bring this here. Let's create a new project, new request collection. We're gonna call it to do minimal API. And basically we're gonna create a new request, which is gonna be default request. It's gonna be a get. And basically we're just gonna pass the URL that we have when we run our application. Let's make sure that our application is running. Yes, it is. And let us send this request. And we can see within Insomnia we have got hello from minimal API. So as we can see here, the simplicity of web API, it's really easy for anyone to directly get up and start developing the APIs with .NET 6. So let's go back here, let's stop our application. Although this is like a very functional web API, it's not really useful for us right now. So what we're going to be doing in order for us to create a minimal API, we're going to minimal to do API. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding our more stuff to it. So we're going to remove all of this, and basically we're going to start from scratch, or actually let us adjust this and we can build on top of that. So the first thing that we're going to be doing here is we're going to be needing some kind of a data type. And basically, for example, within a to-do application, we need to have like an item which is going to contain the title, the description, and if it's done or not. So these 3 things. So normally, if we think about it, it could be some kind of a class. But because right now we're trying to utilize everything from .NET 6 and C# 9 and C# 10, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a record. If you don't know what a record, I have a detailed video which go into the record, which I'm going to be linking here somewhere. So let's go first create a record. So it's going to be a record, and we're going to call this record item. And the way we define it here, we need to specify what type of information we want this record. So we want a int for the ID, we want a string for the title, and basically we want also a boolean for is it done, so it's completed. As simple as that. So now we have a record, and basically this record could be, in another term, let's say class item, and it could be, for example, let's put item 1 so the compiler will not go crazy. And if we put prop int ID, prop string title, if I can type, and lastly boolean. So now we have here a class and a record. So we can see here that a record with a single line we have defined everything, while a class it's a bit bigger, and there's a pros and cons for everyone, but for right now, because a simple example, we're going to be utilizing a record. So let's delete this and let's move this. So once we have created our record, right now we're going to be creating a repository, and basically for this purpose right now we're going to be create an in-memory database, but down this video we're going to change it into connect to an actual database. But for now, just for the demonstration purposes, on the first part of this video we're going to create an in-memory database. The second part is actually connecting this to an actual SQLite database. So we're going to do first is we're going to be creating a class, and this class we're going to call it item repository. And the first thing we're going to be doing is, in order, because it's going to be an in-memory database, we're going to be utilizing dictionaries in order for us to do that. So it's going to be, actually we can do it as var, and we can call it items, var items equal new dictionary, and it's going to be int, and it's going to be an item. Simple as that. Or why it's not happy with var? Let's try to end it like this. Is it happy now? It is happy now. So let's make this as private, so no one can access it directly. So the first thing within an item repository, we're gonna create some initialization data. So whenever we utilize this in-memory database, we'll have some data in it, and we're gonna do that inside the constructor. So public, or we can see if we'll, okay, perfect. It's gonna be item repository. We don't need this. Let's remove the parameters. And basically here we're gonna put var item1 equal new item. I'm gonna put 1, and the first item on my to-do list is go to the gym. And did I do it? No, I didn't. So var item2 equal new item 2, and we're gonna put the title for it, for example, drink water, stay hydrated. So did I drink water? Yes, I did. So that's gonna be true. And var item3 equal new item, which is gonna be watch TV. So 3 watch TV. Okay, and it's gonna be false. So once we have added those, now we need to add them to the dictionary. So it's going to be items.add, item.id, sorry, item1.id, and item1. So let's copy these twice, and we'll make them for item 2 and 3. Item 2, item 2, item 3, 3, item 3. Okay, now that we have specified our in-memory database and we did put some data in it, now we're gonna create the 4 method that we want, which is gonna be the add, get by ID, and delete. So we're gonna be starting by get all. So very easy, it's gonna be public. It's gonna basically return an enumerable of item, and we're gonna call it getAll, as simple as that. And basically we're gonna be utilizing another lambda function, and it's gonna equal to items.values, and that's it. We're gonna return everything inside that list. So the second one is gonna be public as well, and it's gonna be a single item because it's gonna be get by ID, and it's gonna take an int of an ID, and then here we're gonna put items ID, as simple as that. Because it's a dictionary, it's very easy to do all of these selections and queries. So the next one is gonna be add public. It's gonna return a void. We don't really return anything. Add, and it's gonna take an item, and we're gonna do it like this. So it's gonna be, or let's do it as well as like that. So it's gonna be items dot add item dot id item, and then we're gonna do the update. So public void update. It's also gonna take an item, and then we're gonna put items. We're gonna get the value of that item, so we're gonna put item.id, and we're gonna make it equal to an item. As simple as that. So basically, because it's a dictionary, we have a key value pair. So what we're doing is we're getting the value of a certain key, and then we're replacing the entire value with the update. And lastly is gonna be the delete. So public void delete, and basically it's gonna be an int for ID, and then we're gonna put items dot remove. We're gonna be deleting something based on an ID, which is basically based on the key, and we're removing it. As simple as that. So now that we have our repository, and it's gonna be, so far it's gonna be a very, very simple repository. What we're going to be doing is we need to update right now our web application in order for the application to know that there's a repository, and we need to inject it as a services. So previously, in order, if we wanted to do that, we needed to go to the startup class, and we need to inject it in the configure services method, and basically from there the dependency injection will be able to pick it up and do all of that nice work. But here is way more simpler than that. So first of all, let us actually separate this into two different applications. So first of all, we're going to be removing the build from here, and basically we're going to call this builder, and basically you're going to see why I'm doing this right now. So this is going to be app, it's going to be equal builder.build. So you might think to yourself, okay, but this is the same thing. So the reason we're doing this is because we want to inject stuff to the web application builder before it's actually built, and that's what we're gonna be doing right now. So here, before we actually initialize the builder, what we need to do is we need to add that repository to our web application, so it will be automatically injected, so we can actually utilize it. So how do we do that? Very simple. We're gonna put builder.services. If you remember from ASP.NET 5, ASP.NET Core 5, or .NET 5, the latest one, before .NET 6, we had a startup class. Inside the configure services, we used to go to services, .add, singleton, so on and so forth. But here in minimal API, it's gonna be builder, basically the web application builder. Then we directly connect to the services, and then basically we can put add singleton directly from here. And once we do that, we can just put item repository, and right now we have a repository automatically injected into our application. Very nice. So once we have done that, and right now what we can do is we can actually build our first endpoint. So we can see here with roughly around 30 lines of code, we have a web application, we have one endpoint, we have a repository, and we have the configuration for that repository, which is really good. So now let us basically start by creating our endpoint. So what endpoint we want to create? The first one is gonna be the get all items. So app.map. So get all items is gonna be a get. So map get, and we're gonna make it items, as simple as that. And then once we have done that, basically if we put here a comma, we're gonna actually utilize the service which is item repository. And in order for us to utilize this, how do we do that? We need to put this bracket, then we have to put I forgot the name. So we need to put these two, and then we can put item repository because it's a service. Actually, we need to put from services because we are utilizing a service. And then once we do that, we can actually put here the item repository, and we're gonna call it items. And once we have done that, basically we can create a lambda function and we can actually build it from there. So we have just fixed this, and right now from services, in order for us to utilize it, unfortunately we need to add a using statement, but I think down the road they're gonna automatically inject it for now, but for now it's fine. We have a using statement, and basically what we're gonna be doing here is we're gonna directly be returning all items. So it's gonna be return items dot get all, and that's it. So now we have two endpoints. First, which is the default one, and then we have the all items. So let us test this out. So let's run the application .NET build, actually .NET, yeah, build. And then .NET run. And now let's go to our Postman, to our Insomnia. And let's create a new endpoint, a new request, and we're gonna call it get all items. And it's gonna be a get, and it's gonna have the same URL. All we need to do, add to it at the end, is items. And let's send this request, and we can see we got directly the 3 pre-populated items, which is go to the gym, drink water, and watch TV. Perfect. Now to the second endpoint. The second endpoint that we're going to be working on is basically adding an item to our to-do list. So we need to create a post request. So let us go back to our source code. And basically what we're going to be doing is we need to add a new app.map post. And basically we're going to make it as simple as well as items, because there's a difference there. So one for the get, one for a post. We're going to be utilizing the same one from services, and we're going to put item repository. It's going to be items, and then here another lambda function. Let's put a semicolon here. And basically what we're going to be doing here, first we need to make sure that the ID that we are sending does not exist inside our current database or our fake database, which is going to be our dictionary. And after that we need to add it. So we're going to put if items dot get by ID, and we're going to pass the ID of it. So we forgot one thing here, because we're posting it, we're going to be sending an object, so we need to actually embed that object here. So it's going to be item. So what does this mean? Let us fix this issue so we can .id. So we said if this is not equal to null, we're gonna be return results .not found. I think that's a good response. Else items.add, and it's gonna be item. And finally we're gonna return results.ok with an item. Okay, so let's discuss here what happened. So first of all, similar to the one before, because we're going to be utilizing the repository, we need to inject that service into the endpoint that we are creating. So that's why we have injected the items. The second part is the actual object. Because we are going to be sending an object, this endpoint needs to know that it's going to be expecting an object. So for this reason, we have added the item here. And basically automatically what's going on here, minimal API will automatically recognize that it's expecting an item. It will be responsible for doing all of the serialization that we currently have, and once it does all of this serialization for us, and it actually adds them the configuration for the serialization, so it's converting from a string to an object and do all of those checking for us. Once it does all of that, it will allow us to actually utilize it. So we can see here a lot of the complexities that we had before had automatically being handled by the minimal API for us. So after we have done that, the first step that we have done is, because we are sending an object that contains an ID, we need to make sure that that ID does not currently exist inside our database, or basically our fake repository, which is just going to be the dictionary. Once we have done that, we have added a check. So we did like a query on that dictionary to check if that ID exists. So if it did exist, we have returned a not found, because we don't want to really give a lot of information, or we can return a bad request. I think we can return a bad request instead. And once we have done that, once we have done that check, the next step for us is to actually add it to the database or to the dictionary again, utilizing the method that we have, which is add. And once we have done that, we have returned an OK back to the user. So that's the second endpoint, which is basically posting a new request. So let's test it out right now. Let's save these changes. Let us go back to our terminal. Let's put .NET build to make sure it's building as it should. And .NET run. Perfect. Now let's go back to our Insomnia, and basically we're gonna create a new request, and this is gonna be add item, and it's gonna be of type post. It's gonna expect a JSON body, and we're gonna create it. We're gonna take the same URL, and here we're gonna create the JSON object. So we're gonna put an ID of 4, because we know we have 1, 2, 3, 4 there. And then we're gonna create a title, and this title we're gonna say what can we add something on our to-do list is basically publish this video. And once we have done that, is it completed? No. So is completed, the I needs to be minimal, and we're gonna put as false. Okay, great. So let us send this request and see what's gonna happen. And we got presented with an issue. Let's see what happened here on line 43. So it says on line 43, basically get by ID. Oh, okay, I know what's going on here. We directly assume that's gonna exist, so that's not gonna happen. So let's do it like this, without this. So we're gonna be updating the get by ID method. First, we're gonna check by the contain key, which is available for us through the dictionary. So it's gonna put if items dot contains key, and we're gonna pass the actual key here. It's gonna be ID. So if it does, it's gonna return an ID, the item that we want, else it's gonna return null. Why is this complaining? Okay. So basically what we're doing here is, let's see, why is this? Okay. So basically here what we're doing is, once it comes to check, it sends the ID, and basically what we're doing is we're checking if this ID, if this key exists within the dictionary. If it does, it will return the item. If not, it will return null. So let us test this out. Let's stop the application, let us run it again, and let us go back to Insomnia. Okay, let's send this. And basically right now it passed all of the checks and we have added it. So right now if we get all of the items, we should see we have 4 items. Perfect. So just be wary, because once we stop the application, the 4th item that we have added is going to be going from the database, because it's an in-memory database. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code and let's stop this. Something else that we want to add here is, instead of returning OK once the post has been completed, let's update this so we return something more meaningful, which actually comply with the REST API, which is basically we're going to be recreating a created HTTP status with the endpoint for it as well as the object. So we can change this to like something like this, created, and basically instead of having the items here, we're gonna here add the path for it. We did not create this endpoint yet, get by ID, but we're gonna actually be creating it, so it's gonna be get by ID or items, something like this, items / item.id, and basically this is it. So right now, let's run this again, and let us see the HTTP code that's going to be returned for us and the value of it. So let's go back to Insomnia, and let us go back to add. First, let's get all items. We should see it's 3 items now. And now if we go to add items and we add this, we can see that first we got a 201 instead of 200. It means that the record has been added correctly. As well, if we're gonna see the headers now, we should see the location of how we can actually see this object. And if we click on it, we can see that we have got the location as well of how actually we can see it. Perfect. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And once we are here, let us add our another endpoint. So the next endpoint that we want to add is the get by ID. So it's going to be app.mapGet, and basically it's going to be /items /ID, and basically after that we're going to be using the same thing. So from services, I'm gonna close it, and we're gonna put item repository. It's gonna be items, and it's gonna take an int ID. And then once we do this, we're gonna create this. Perfect. So basically right now what we did, it auto completed, but basically let's remove this and we can type it. So it's gonna be return items get by ID. Perfect. So what we did here is what we're doing is we have checked or basically we have added a new endpoint, which is going to be the get by ID. Actually, we need to update this a bit more. So let's put this var items, var item equal item, and we're going to be checking. So return if item equal null, we're going to be returning results not found. And if it's not null, we're going to be returning results dot okay and item. Okay. So basically we have added a new endpoint, which is the get by ID. It's we follow the same structure of a REST API, so items / ID, and then basically we have utilized the items repository because the service that we want in order for us to connect with the dictionary. And once we have done that, we have added the actually query string, which is going to be ID, which is going to be utilized by us. So, but again, minimal APIs by itself, it has identified that the ID here is going to be a query string, not an object. So it worked by itself. And then what we did here, we have connected to the repository, get by ID, check the item. If it's null, we return not found. If it's not null, we have returned the item with an OK. So that's this right now. Let's save this and let's put .NET run. Great. Now let's go back to our Insomnia and let's add another request. We'll put get by ID. It's going to be of type get. So create. So let's put this here. Let's take this. And because we already know that there is going to be an ID1, so let's put ID1 and let's send this request. And we can see here we got the first one. And right now, if I put, for example, ID6, I should get a not found. And we have got a not found. Perfect. And if I put ID2, we should get ID2. Great. So that's the exact behavior that we want. The next step is we want to update, which is going to be utilizing a put request. So let's do this right now. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And basically, we're going to add a new endpoint here. So it's going to be basically app.map put. And basically, it's going to be similar to what we had before. So it's gonna be /items /id, because that we need in the put. And then after we have done that, we need to add the services similar to what we have done before. So from services, we're gonna utilize the item repository. It's gonna be items, and then we're specifying the ID, and then we're specifying the object that we're gonna update, which is gonna be item. And then once we have done that, let us create our body. So what we've done here, because on a put we need to send the ID within the URL as well, we need to send the object that we want to update. So we put items / curly braces ID, and then we have actually utilized the repository, which is going to be items, and then we have put the ID, which is going to be a query string, and we have put the item, which is going to be the body of the request. And basically the item here is going to be automatically serialized from the request itself. So once we have done that, let us now build the object for this. The first thing what we're going to be doing is we need to check if this exists or not. So if items.get by ID, and we're going to pass the ID equal to null, what we're going to be returning is not found. So return results.not found, as simple as that. So now that we have made sure that the object actually exists, we can actually update it. So how do we update it? We're just going to be utilizing the method inside items that we currently have. So it's going to be items.update, and we're going to send the item itself. And then once we have done that, we're going to return results.ok, and it's going to be the item itself. As simple as that. So let's do a quick recap. We know why you have right now the item services, the item repository. Now we have the ID as a query string. We have the item as an object. We did the check to make sure the get by ID is not null, and then basically we're just updating it and returning it. So save. Let's stop this. Let's run it again. Let's go back to Insomnia, and let's create a new request, and we're gonna say update item, and it's gonna be a put, and it's gonna be a JSON body. So create. So what we're gonna be doing here is we're gonna basically, let's take one of these IDs. So we have title, drink water, watch TV. So let's update this one, for example, from false to true. So here, let's add here, and basically this is gonna become true. And let's take the same ID as this one, same URL I mean, and let's paste it here, and now let's send this request. So right now, if we put get all items, we can see that watch TV is false. The expected result of this to switch to true, so let's send this. And we got this here right now, it has been completed successfully. So now let's get all item and check if it has been updated, and we can see that it has automatically updated. Perfect. The last endpoint that we want to add is the actual delete endpoint. So let's add this. So it's going to be app.map_delete, and it's going to be similar to what we had before, /items / the ID that we want to delete. And then it's going to be the services, from services, and it's going to be item repository. It's going to be items, and we're going to specify the int as an ID. And once that's done, we need to actually build a body for this method. So right now, similar to what we have done before, the first thing is we have identified the item repository, which is going to connect to the in-memory database, and then we have specified the ID as a query string. So next, we're going to be doing the same thing as we did before. So let's copy this, because it's going to be the exactly same thing. And once we have done this, let's just do a quick formatting. Once we have done this, the next step for us is to actually delete. So it's going to be item.delete, and we're going to pass the ID for it. And then once we have done that, we're going to be returning a results of no content, because that's what you return within the REST API if there's a delete. So let's stop this. Let's run this again. Let's go back to Insomnia, and let us create an item for publish this video. And right now, if we put get all, we have 4 items. So now let's try to delete drink water. So let's create a new request, and we're gonna put delete item, and it's gonna be also a delete, and put a create. Let's get the same ID, and let's paste it here. So right now we're gonna be deleting item number 2. So currently we can see we have 4, so we're gonna be deleting 2, and it should be 3. So delete, we got a 204 no content, which means it has been deleted. And right now if I do this, we can see that there's 3. If I delete, for example, the first one, we should now receive only 2. And then if I delete number 4, we should only have 1 left, which is number 3. So if we go here, and we can only watch TV. Perfect. So now that we have covered the 5 main endpoint, which is for our CRUD operation, which is add, delete, update, which is going to be the put, and get by ID, and get all, for example, these are the 5 endpoints that we currently have. What we're going to be doing is right now we're going to be actually connecting to a SQLite database, and we can see how are we going to inject a DbContext, how are we going to be injecting a connection string without having all of the startup stuff. We're going to be utilizing the web builder that we had before, and we're going to see how it's going to be happening right now. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to stop this. So the first thing that we're going to be doing right now is we need to install 2 packages in order for our application to be able to communicate with SQLite. So inside our terminal, we're going to put .NET add package Microsoft.entity framework core.SQLite. So that's the first package we're going to install. Perfect. Now the second package is we're going to be using in order for us to create the migrations and basically creating the database by itself. So it's going to be again .NET add package Microsoft.entity framework core.design. And this should take a few seconds, and it's done. Now let's go to our CS Proj, and we can see that both of them have been installed successfully for us. And we can see something else interesting, which is here that is targeting .NET 6, which is what we want exactly. We're gonna delve into nullable and implicit using all in a different video, but for now let's just take them as it is, and we're gonna be explaining them in detail in a much more later video. Okay, great. So once we have installed this, the first thing that we're going to be doing is we need to create a new app settings. So here we're going to create a new file, and this file we're going to call it app settings.json. Oh, sorry, there is an app settings.json. Apologies for this. We're just going to be adding to this app settings.json is a connection string. So here we're going to add a default connection string, default connection. And basically this is gonna be a SQLite connection. So it's gonna be data source equal app.db. As simple as that. So that's gonna be the connection string that we're gonna be using, and basically right now Entity Framework will be able to pick that up and check if the database exists. If not, it will create a database for us once we create the migration. So once we have done that, let's go back here, and the next step is we need to create our data context or API DbContext. So after this here, at the end of this, let us create our DbContext. So it's gonna be class API DbContext, and we're going to be utilizing the DbContext, and basically we're going to be utilizing the dbset. So public dbset item, it's going to be items, and basically what this means, it means actually that the item here is going to be a table inside our database called items. So let's put this here, let's fix those references. And once we have done that, we need right now to create the constructor, so ctor, and basically this we need to update to API DbContext, and then here we need to remove this, and we'll put DbContext options, and we need to pass the API DbContext, if I can type, options, and once we have done that, we need to pass it to the base. And perfect, we don't really need these. Bye bye. And now basically, if you look at this, we have a full API DbContext, and we have within a less 93 lines of code, we have a web API, we have an endpoint, actually 6 endpoints, we have a repository in less than 95 lines of code, which is perfect. But right now we need to actually inject all of these, do some cleanups, and make sure that everything works with the new database. So first thing first, we're gonna actually be getting the connection string. So it's gonna be var connection string equal. So this needs to be after the builders, apologies. So it's gonna be here. It's gonna put builder dot configuration connection string dot default connection. So basically here, again, similar to what we had before inside the startup class, we're connecting to the configuration that is provided within the configure services method, and here directly builder is able to pick that up, get the configuration. It's picking up the configuration from the app settings. So once we have done that, next is we need to build our, actually inject our API DbContext inside our application. So it's going to be builder dot services dot add DbContext, and we're going to be passing the API DbContext, and then basically we're going to pass the options, and the options going to be options dot use SQLite, and we're going to be passing the connection string, and that's it. So as we can see here, within like 3 lines of code, actually 2 lines of code, if we put this here, we will be able to inject a DbContext inside our application. Perfect. The next step that we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a migration script so we can actually create the database. So inside our terminal, we're going to put .NET EF. Actually, let's clear this up so it will be a bit more clearer. It's going to be .NET EF migrations. And we're going to put initial migration. And it's going to take a few seconds to create it. It's building it. Now we should see a folder on the left hand side which is called migrations. Perfect. And now once we have created this migration, let us actually implement it and create the database. So .NET EF database update. And now we should see a file on the left hand side which is called app.db. And perfect, we can see app.db. And right now if we use dbbeaver, so now let us add a new connection, SQLite, next, let's browse. So inside our desktop, it's gonna be YouTube, to do API, it's gonna go app.db. Let us test this connection successful, let us finish, and let us open this. And now we should see a table called items, and if we view this table, we should see the 3 items, which is ID, title, and is completed. Great. So let us go back, and once we have done that, the next step for us basically is we're going to be deleting the items repository, and basically we're going to be directly injecting the API DbContext inside our endpoints. So let us remove this, or we can comment this out because we don't really need it anymore. We don't really need this, so let's save this. And right now we see there's a lot of error because we have removed this. So we're gonna actually be replacing this with an API DbContext. So let us start here first. So first of all, we don't really have this anymore, so we can remove it. I'll tell you what, let's us comment it out. And here basically right now, we need to update this in order for us to utilize the API DbContext. So what we can do is we can remove from services because it's not an injected service anymore. And we can put here, it's gonna be API DbContext, and we're gonna call this DB. And basically we're gonna update this in order for us to directly connect to the DB or the API DbContext. So db.items, and that's it. and right now we're returning everything and then items. Or we can make it as an async, so we can put dot to list async, and basically we can await this, similar to what we do usually. Sorry, this can be async, and wait. So right now we can see here that what we have done is we have made this get items async. We have replaced the repository with an API DbContext. We made this entire method an async. We connected directly to the database, and we got everything else. So now let us update the items. So similar to what we have done before, let's remove all of this. We don't need it. And we're gonna put here API DbContext. It's gonna be DB. Again, items. So instead of having all of this, we're gonna be removing this, and it's gonna be item dot, actually it's gonna be db dot items dot where dot id equal id dot first or default. Actually, we can make this first or default from here. Let's make this as well await, and let's make this async, and here it's going to be item.id. So it's not equal to null. We're gonna be directly returning a bad request. If it is, it's gonna be db.items.add, and it's gonna be db.save changes async, and this is gonna be an await. Perfect. So right now what we have done here is we have updated from repository directly to our API DbContext. We first directly checked into database, first or default. So if it exists, it's gonna return it. If not, it's gonna return null. So if it is null, it's gonna return a bad request. Else it's gonna return it's gonna add the object. So if it's not null, sorry, it's gonna return a bad request. It was right. So once we have done that, the next step for us is to the map get by ID. So again, it's gonna be API DbContext, and it's gonna be DB. And basically here it's gonna be similar to what we have done here. It's gonna be db.items.first or default async, and we're gonna make this a lambda function. .id equal id. So if this equal null, we'll return a not found. If not, we return an okay well done item. Again, here we need to remove all of this. It's going to be API DbContext, and this is going to be DB. Let's copy the same thing here because we don't really want to repeat our code. And basically, okay, here we forgot to make this as an async. Let's make this as well as an async. And here, the update is going to be a bit tricky. Why? Because record is immutable, and we cannot really change it after we have initialized a record. So the reason, the main thing that we need to do right now is to be actually change the record to a class. And basically within a class, it will make it more easier. So right now, instead of having a record item, let's create a class. So it's gonna be class item. It's gonna be prop int id. I don't know why I did this here. Prop string title. Everything is lowercase, although it shouldn't. Let's fix those as well. And lastly, prop bool is completed. Once we have done this, we can see here that because it's a lowercase I, let's fix it to capital I. Similar to what we have done here, again here, again here, and here. Okay, great. So now we can actually update it. So let us do this in a much more streamlined way. So we put like this, and we'll put for exist item equal, so we can use this here. And then here what we can do, if exist item not equal to null, we can update it, so it will be something like this: exist items dot title equal item dot title, exist item dot is completed equal item dot is completed. Once we have done that, all we need to do right now is just save the change into the database and then return the item as okay. Perfect. Again, here we need to remove this, so this will be API DbContext SDB. Let's copy this, just repeating the same code, we're just checking for nulls. And basically right now, in order for us to be deleted, all this needs to be async. We cannot directly delete from here, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to put db.items.remove, and we're going to be basically passing the object, which is going to be exist item, and then once we have done that, we're going to save the changes into the database. And I think we still have one error here which is showing up. Let's see, what is this error? What is this error? Okay, so here item.id for delete. No, it shouldn't be like this, it should just be the ID. Okay, great. Right now, if we run it, we should not see anything because we did not pre-populate it. So let's put .NET run. Let's go back to Insomnia. And if we get all items, we should not see anything. It should be empty, completely empty. And we're getting an error. No such column is complete. I wonder why. Let's go back to Insomnia. And let's go back to DBBeaver. So here it says it's completed, not is complete. Apologies. I mistyped it here. So it's going to be is completed. I think there's one place we need to fix it, which is here as well. Okay. Now let us run this. Now let's go back to Insomnia and let's get this. Now it should be completely empty. Perfect. Now let's add an item. Let's use the same one. 201 created. Get all items. Perfect. We got it. Get by ID. I think ID was 4. Should get it for us. Perfect. We got it. We need to update on this, but that should be fine for now. Delete item. Actually, let's update the item. So that was number 4. And we're gonna change it. What was it? Publish this video. We're gonna say publish this video early morning. Publish this video early morning. So now let's send this. We got a bad request. Let's see why we got a bad request on the update. So the ID, what was the ID for? And we make sure the ID is 4, that's correct. Oh, here we have put 2 instead of 4. Okay, now this should work. Nope, still the same error. So ID, item, ID, actually this should be ID, not item.id. Okay, first or default, so if it's not equal to null, this is the issue, it needs to be null. So here this should be null. So if it's equal or null, it's a bad request because it does not exist, so we cannot update it. So let's stop this and let's run this again. Let us go back here and let us send the request. 200, it got updated. Now if we get by ID, we should get it. Publish this video early morning. And lastly, if we delete this one, we should get 400. I think it's a similar issue. So if it is null, we return a bad request, else we can delete it. So let's stop this and let's run this again. And let's delete it again. We should get a 204 no content. And now if we get all item, it should not be there. Perfect. So basically within this video right now, we have did a quick summary of Minimal API. So let's do a quick recap on this. So first of all, let's go back to Visual Studio Code. The first thing that we have done is created a builder, which basically converted the console application to a web application. Then second, we have connected to our app settings so we can get the connection string. Once we have gotten the connection string, we have created our DbContext, which is this one here. We have created one table inside of it, which is called items for our to-do list. And basically, once we have done that, we have injected it inside our application DbContext and injected to our services so we can actually utilize it inside our application. Once we have done that, we just took the builder and we have started building our application. Once we have the builder.build, it means that the application is ready for us to consume inside our source code. So once we have done that, we have built first of all the first endpoint that we wanted, which is map.get, which is basically get all of the items for us. And basically we have utilized the DbContext in order for us to connect with the database and basically to get all of the information from the database for that table. And second was basically we wanted to add one item to it, so we created a post and we were able to add one item. Second is we needed to get one single item, so we passed the ID and we got the response back. And here I can see that this needs to be awaited. That's why it was causing an issue. Secondly, all we put, which is basically will enable us to update the item inside our to-do list. The delete is basically we'll remove it from the database. And lastly, what we did is we put app.run, which basically bootstrap the application and run it for us. And we can see here that I think, let's remove all of it. I think this is what, from 75 till, so that's roughly 25 line of code. It's commented out. So we can think roughly in 70 line of code, we have a web application running, we have 6 endpoints, we have an application DbContext, and we have all of the initialization, which is ready for us to use. And this is amazing compared to what we had before. All of those ceremonial things that we needed to do does not exist anymore. The application is very compact and it's very powerful. I hope this video gave you a clear introduction to Minimal API. There's still a lot of stuff that we can actually utilize. Excuse me. There's a lot of stuff that we can actually still utilize with Minimal API. This is just scratching the surface of it. Hope you find this video helpful. Please like and share and subscribe if you like this video. It will really help the channel. Have a good day. As well, please comment your questions in the comments down below, and the source code for this will be available on GitHub. Have a good day.